Hey everyone, welcome to another deep dive.
Yeah.
This time we're tackling something. I think we all have a kind of love-hate relationship with
Uh-huh.
regret.
Yeah.
We're diving into Daniel H. Pink's book, The Power of Regret,
Oh, fantastic book.
and his framework of 4 core regrets.
Right.
But here's the twist.
Right?
We're not going to wallow in all this shoulda, woulda, couldas.
Okay.
We're going to look at how understanding these regrets can actually help us make better choices going forward.
Right.
And maybe even like help us grow as people. It's kind of a wild idea.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that you don't think about in a positive light.
No.
But when you really start to unpack it,
Yeah.
there's a lot of good stuff in there.
Let's dive in.
It's so interesting how we're bombarded with this no regrets message everywhere.
Oh, totally.
You know, Edith Piaf singing, Je ne regrette rien.
Right.
Countless no regrets tattoos. It's like we're supposed to just pretend regret doesn't even exist.
Yeah, it's like this weakness
Yeah.
you're not supposed to admit to.
Right.
But Pink argues that regret is actually a universal human emotion,
It is.
and a healthy one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Research shows that regret is actually vital
Okay.
for learning and making positive changes.
Right.
It's like a signal
Okay.
that something wasn't quite right with a past choice.
Yeah.
And it gives us a chance to course correct.
Okay, so it's not just about feeling bad.
Right.
It's about actually like utilizing that feeling.
Exactly. Using that feedback
Yeah.
to hopefully make better choices in the future.
Okay, so regret, it's normal.
Uh-huh.
It can even be useful.
It can be.
But what makes it uniquely human?
Right.
I mean, my cat doesn't seem to regret knocking things off the counter.
Well, probably not in the same way that we do. But
Right.
Pink talks about how humans have this incredible ability
Okay.
to mentally time travel
Okay.
and imagine what if scenarios.
Yes.
He calls it counterfactual thinking.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Think back to when you were a kid.
Okay.
You know, you're riding your bike, you take a tumble, and you start thinking, if only I had gone a different way.
Totally. Yeah.
That's counterfactual thinking developed. And it's this ability that allows us to experience regret.
It's like our brains are constantly running simulations.
They are.
Comparing what actually happened to all the other possibilities.
Yeah, and the crazy thing is,
Yeah.
the inability to experience regret
What?
can actually be a sign of brain damage.
Oh, really?
It highlights how important this emotion is
Interesting.
for our development and our decision making.
Wow. That's a whole new perspective on regret.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so we know it's normal, we know it's useful,
Right.
and we know it's this uniquely human experience.
Yeah.
So let's get into the heart of Pink's research,
Okay.
the 4 core regrets.
These 4 categories,
Okay.
foundation regrets, boldness regrets, moral regrets, and connection regrets,
Right.
really capture the essence of what we most often regret in life.
All right, so foundation regrets.
Yeah.
What are those all about?
Think of it like this.
Okay.
Imagine you're building a house.
Okay.
If the foundation is weak,
Mm-hmm.
the whole structure is compromised, right?
Makes sense.
Foundation regrets are all about the choices we make
Oh, okay.
or don't make
Right.
that impact the stability and security of our lives.
Interesting.
Things like neglecting our health or our finances or our education.
So yeah, those would be like
Yeah,
the heavy hitters.
right. Big ones.
Can you give us an example from the book?
Pink talks about a guy named Jason
Oh,
who worked hard his whole life
okay.
but never saved a dime.
Oh, no.
Now he's in his 40s.
Yeah.
He's struggling financially
Yeah.
and he's filled with regret
Right.
over his past choices.
Yeah.
It's a classic case of prioritizing immediate gratification over long-term well-being.
Yeah, the treat yourself mentality
Right.
can really backfire.
Sometimes that instant gratification comes with a pretty hefty price tag later on.
Totally. Okay, so speaking of treating yourself,
Uh-huh.
let's move on to boldness regrets.
Oh, okay.
These sound like
Yeah.
the missed opportunities that
Yeah.
we kick ourselves for.
Yeah, those what-ifs that haunt us.
Right.
Think about a time you held back from
Yeah.
expressing your true feelings
Yeah.
or pursuing a passion.
Oh, yeah.
What was the outcome?
Ooh, that hits close to home.
Yeah, right.
Pink had some pretty compelling examples of boldness regrets in the book.
He tells this story about a guy named Bruce
Okay.
who had a chance encounter with a woman on a train.
Okay.
He was instantly smitten, but he was too afraid to get off the train with her. And he's carried that what if for
Yeah.
decades,
What?
wondering what might have been if he had just been a little bolder.
Yeah, that's boldness regrets.
Right.
The possibility of a more fulfilling life
Exactly.
that we were too afraid to pursue.
That's it.
Okay. Those first 2 categories
Mhm.
are about like personal choices and self-improvement.
Right.
But I have a feeling moral regrets
Yeah.
are on a whole other level.
They are.
These are the ones that really get to the core of who we are as people.
They do. These are the regrets that sting the most.
Yeah.
Because they involve violating our own ethical code or causing harm to others.
Yeah.
Pink found that even though specific moral codes vary across cultures, the principles of harming others, cheating, and disloyalty consistently trigger the most intense regrets.
Makes sense.
These are the regrets that force us to confront our values and ask ourselves some tough questions about the kind of person we want to be.
There's no escaping those moral dilemmas.
Not really.
The book had some pretty intense examples, right?
Think about Steve, who was a bully in his youth. He carried that weight for years.
Wow.
Riddled with guilt over the pain he inflicted on others.
Wow.
Later in life, he actually dedicated his career to helping troubled kids.
Oh, wow.
As a way to atone for his past actions.
That's powerful.
It's a really powerful example of how moral regret can motivate us to make amends and live a more ethical life.
It's almost like regret can be a catalyst for redemption.
It can be.
Okay. And finally, we have connection regrets.
Yeah.
I feel like this category really speaks to our fundamental human need.
Right.
For belonging and connection.
These are the regrets that center around relationships with loved ones.
Right.
The broken friendships, the missed connections, the strained family ties.
Oh, yeah. I can definitely relate to that.
Yeah.
We're social creatures.
We are.
Those connections are so vital to our well-being.
They are.
What were some of the examples of connection regrets that stood out to you in the book?
There's this really poignant story about two friends, Cheryl and Jen. They were inseparable in their youth, but over time, life got in the way, and they slowly drifted apart. Years later, Cheryl realized how much she regretted losing that connection, and she made a conscious effort to reach out to Jen.
I'm dying to know what happened.
We'll get to that. But first, I think it's important to note that these 4 core regrets aren't mutually exclusive.
Right.
Our regrets often blend and overlap.
Totally.
But understanding these categories gives us a framework for examining our past choices and figuring out what truly matters to us.
It's like having a map to navigate the complex landscape of regret.
It is.
So we've laid the groundwork. We've explored these 4 core regrets.
Right.
And now I'm really eager to see how we can use this knowledge to make better decisions moving forward.
That's exactly what we'll dive into next.
All right.
We'll explore how to turn regret from this nagging voice in the back of your mind into a proactive tool for growth and change.
I like it.
Stay with us.
All right.
So we've talked about how regret can actually be this valuable source of information about our values and priorities. But how do we actually use that information to make better decisions going forward?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question.
Right.
I'm all ears.
Well, one powerful technique Pink talks about is using anticipated regret.
Anticipated regret.
Yeah.
So like taking a moment to think, okay, if I choose this path, what might I regret down the road?
Exactly. It's that pause, that mental leap into the future, where you envision the potential consequences of your choices. Pink uses the example of Jeff Bezos. And his decision to leave his stable job to start Amazon. You know, Bezos asked himself, looking back from the future, will I regret not taking this risk?
Interesting.
And that helped him to make that leap.
Okay, that makes sense.
Right.
But isn't there a danger there of overthinking things?
Yeah.
If I start analyzing every little decision through the lens of potential regret, I'll never get anything done.
You bring up a really good point. Anticipated regret is a powerful tool. But it's important to use it strategically. We don't want to get bogged down in analysis paralysis. Right. One way to avoid that is to focus on the big decisions. Those life-altering choices that align with, you know, those 4 core regret categories we talked about. So for those major decisions, how do we effectively use anticipated regret?
What are some concrete steps?
Well, one technique is to visualize your future self. Say 5 or 10 years down the line. And ask yourself, what would my future self wish I had done in this situation?
Interesting.
Another helpful approach is to consider the opportunity cost. Every decision we make means saying no to something else. So ask yourself, what am I giving up by choosing this path over that one?
That's a really practical way to frame it. By weighing the potential regrets of both action and inaction.
We can gain a clearer perspective on what truly aligns with our values and goals.
And anticipated regret can actually be a powerful motivator to push us outside our comfort zones and pursue those bold opportunities that we might otherwise shy away from.
This reminds me of that study Pink mentioned about the lottery ticket in the multiple choice test. It showed how our fear of regret can sometimes lead us to make irrational choices.
Remember how people refused to trade their lottery ticket for a guaranteed $3?
Oh, yeah.
They were so focused on the potential regret of giving up a winning ticket.
Right, even though the odds were astronomically against them.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's like we're hardwired to avoid that feeling of, if only I hadn't.
We are, and those studies highlight the importance of finding a balance. Right. We want to use anticipated regret as a guide, but not let it cripple us with indecision or fear.
So how do we strike that balance? How do we use anticipated regret without letting it take over?
Well, one helpful concept is satisficing.
Satisficing. Sounds like settling.
It's not about settling. It's about recognizing that in most situations, we don't have the time or resources to find the absolute perfect solution. Right. It was a term coined by Nobel Prize-winning economist Herbert Simon. And he argued that we should aim for a decision that is good enough. One that meets our core needs and moves us in the right direction.
So instead of agonizing over every little detail, we should focus on finding a solution that aligns with our goals and then move on.
Exactly. Save that anticipated regret energy for the big decisions, the ones that really have the potential to shape our lives.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So we've talked about anticipated regret, the importance of balance, and satisficing as a decision-making strategy. But there's this whole other layer to regret that Pink touches on. This philosophical question of free will versus fate.
He actually surveyed thousands of people about their beliefs. And the results were so intriguing.
Really? What were they?
The vast majority of people believe in both free will and the idea that things happen for a reason.
Wait, how is that possible?
I know.
Those seem like contradictory beliefs.
It does seem paradoxical. But maybe, as Pink suggests, it's not about choosing one or the other. Maybe it's about recognizing that both forces are at play in our lives.
So, like, there's an element of surrender. And acceptance that some things are beyond our control.
And that brings us to a really interesting connection. The link between regret and storytelling.
Wait, storytelling? How does that fit in?
Think about it. When we experience regret, we're essentially rewriting the narrative of our lives. We're looking back, imagining a different path, a happier ending.
So we're not just the characters in our own stories, but also the authors, constantly editing and revising.
Exactly.
And that's where the concept of redemption comes in.
That's it.
Regret can be painful.
It can be.
But it can also be this catalyst
for growth.
For growth and transformation.
And change.
Like that Japanese art of kintsugi.
Oh, I love that.
Where broken pottery is repaired with gold, making those cracks part of the object's beauty.
It's beautiful.
Our regrets, when acknowledged and addressed, can become part of our own unique story.
I love that analogy. Our regrets can actually make us more interesting, more resilient, more compassionate. They become part of what makes us us.
And even more importantly, they can help us write a better story moving forward.
That's it.
So how do we move from regret to redemption? What are some practical steps we can take to turn those painful experiences into opportunities for growth?
That's exactly what we'll explore in the final part of our deep dive. We'll unpack specific strategies for processing regret, practicing self-compassion, and ultimately using those experiences to craft a more fulfilling narrative.
I love it.
For our lives.
So we've covered a lot of ground. The science of regret. The 4 core categories. Even how to use anticipated regret to make better decisions. But I'm really intrigued by this idea of redemption. How do we move from feeling stuck in regret to actually using it as a springboard for positive change?
It's a powerful shift in perspective.
It is.
And Pink offers some really concrete strategies for turning regret from a burden into a catalyst for growth.
I'm ready for some actionable advice.
Right.
Where do we start?
Well, the first step is acknowledging those feelings of regret.
Okay.
Rather than trying to bury them or pretend they don't exist.
Makes sense. Bottling things up.
Right.
Never seems to work out well in the long run.
Pink talks about the power of self-disclosure.
Okay.
Whether it's confiding in a trusted friend or a therapist.
Yeah.
Or even just journaling about those regrets. Getting those thoughts and emotions out of your head and into the open can be incredibly freeing.
It's like releasing some of that pressure.
It is.
But what about when those regrets involve hurting someone else?
Yeah.
How do we deal with the guilt and the shame?
That's where self-compassion comes in.
Self-compassion, okay.
A leading researcher in this field, Kristin Neff, emphasizes that self-compassion isn't about making excuses for our behavior.
Right.
It's about treating ourselves with the same kindness and understanding we would offer a friend going through a similar struggle.
So instead of beating ourselves up over past mistakes, we try to approach those regrets with a gentler, more understanding attitude.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that we're all human.
Right.
We all make mistakes, and that those mistakes don't define us.
That's a much more helpful approach than the constant self-criticism
I
think a lot of us engage in.
Yeah.
Are there any specific techniques for cultivating self-compassion?
One simple practice is to just ask yourself, what would I say to a friend who felt this way?
Oh, that's good.
Often we're much harder on ourselves.
That's so true.
than you would ever be on someone else.
Okay. So we've talked about acknowledging our regrets, practicing self-compassion.
Right.
What's the next step in this redemption process?
Pink suggests a technique called self-distancing.
Self-distancing?
Yeah.
So how do we actually do that?
Uh-huh.
How do we create that distance from those emotions?
One way is through language.
Okay.
Instead of replaying the regret in your mind using try using your name or you as if you're observing the situation from outside yourself.
Interesting.
So it's like creating a little bit of psychological space between yourself and the regret.
Does that really work?
It can be surprisingly effective.
Or?
It helps to detach from that raw emotion and gain a more objective viewpoint.
Okay.
You can even try writing about the regretful experience as if it happened to someone else.
Interesting.
This can really help to reduce the emotional intensity.
Okay.
And allow for clearer thinking and problem solving.
That's a really clever approach.
Yeah.
And all of these techniques, self-disclosure, self-compassion, self-distancing, they all seem to work together.
They do.
It's about processing those regrets in a healthy way so we can move forward.
It's about transforming regret from a source of paralysis into a source of action.
Speaking of action,
Yeah.
you mentioned earlier that Cheryl reached out to her friend Jen
Yeah.
after decades of regretting their lost connection. What happened?
Well, Cheryl wrote Jen a heartfelt letter expressing her sadness over their drifting apart and her hope that they could reconnect to Cheryl's surprise and relief. Jen responded positively.
Oh, good.
They started emailing and eventually talking on the phone, slowly rebuilding their friendship.
That's such a beautiful story.
It is.
It shows that even when we think it's too late, there's always a possibility for healing and growth.
Absolutely. And it highlights the power of taking ownership of our regrets and taking action to make amends.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the power of regret, what's the key takeaway for our listeners?
I think the biggest takeaway is that regret, while often seen as this negative emotion, can actually be this profound source of wisdom and growth.
It's a reminder that we care. That we're capable of learning from our mistakes. And that we have the power to create a more meaningful future.
Beautifully put.
And I love how Pink encourages us to think of our lives as stories. He asks, if our lives are stories we tell ourselves, how can we use regret to become better storytellers? And craft a more fulfilling narrative?
That's such a powerful question.
It is.
It invites us to embrace those imperfections, those twists and turns, and use them to create a story that's authentic, resilient, and full of heart.
So to our listeners, we encourage you to explore your own regrets. Not with judgment, but with curiosity and a willingness to learn. Use those experiences to make more aligned choices. To mend broken connections. And to ultimately craft a life story that you're proud to tell.
That's it.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Yeah, thanks everyone.